Right.
Okay, so we'll just go on into it.
Yeah.
The
Want
first
me to read the
question, oh, go ahead. The first question is, what do you think about the different alternatives beyond just individual therapy, and how do you feel about it?
yeah. Um, I can start. So yeah, I took I took family dynamics last semester. And well, I think it's obviously super important work. Doesn't really call to me, but I could see needing to use it even in certain ways in individual therapy. So I think it's good to have some understanding of like the systems theory, and ideas around um, this informed consent, that all members have to really understand what, who is considered the client here. Is the family the client? Or I guess in the case of like if you're doing individual therapy, um, then your individual client is probably, the client, but then just being very clear with the other members of the system, so that it is beneficial to everyone. Um, for me personally, I am very drawn to group therapy. I've participated in it, and I found it to be actually even a little bit more helpful to me than individual therapy because of how relational it is. You're not simply relying on the therapist as the person, to do your transference work with, but you get to do the transference, and counter transference with a whole bunch of people in the group, and you'll have different dynamics with each person. So I felt like it's such a rich environment for seeing all your stuff come up. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel similar when I was first reading this question. I very much felt like me as a client first. So I was like, oh, I love group therapy. I've done it a couple different times in different types of like, you know, environments, I guess, or like certain topics.
Mm,
And for me, I like really believe in like collective care, and it's helpful to like have people you relate to on like a very specific level, and that like you feel seen by. And I haven't had like group therapy where like conflict really happens. I know when I was reading like in group dynamics when I was in that class last year, that was like a big part of it, whereas like you probably have to deal with some people who are like really trying to like push against the clinician, but I
mm,
haven't gotten to like experience that. And I think that was one thing that kind of turned me off to like wanting to be like a clinician who does group therapy is even doing family therapy, it's like wrangling a lot of different personalities and dynamics. And um, I think maybe that's something I have to like take more training and classes about. But I definitely agree that I feel like it's, if anything, a little bit more helpful than just being an individual therapy. Doing them in tandem has been super helpful for me as like a client.
yeah. I mean, having the ability to do both is incredible. Like, I wish everyone could do that.
Mhm.
And which speaks to the other thing that's so valuable about group is that it can be accessible financially to people for whom
Totally.
individual isn't. And so
Mhm.
it's definitely something that I would like to offer as a clinician. Um, because yeah, I just had a good experience with it myself. I did have pretty serious conflict in the
Oh.
group
Mhm.
that I was in, which was interesting to me. I wasn't expecting it, but there was like a very, unfortunately, I didn't get the work all the way through it, but when I was doing the reading and there was this emphasis on like as if you're going to be facilitating groups to really get to know each of the kind of personality structures of the people involved,
Mhm.
to just understand like compatibility and what are we in for here, putting this group of people together. And I think what my experience told me was like, I don't think you can always anticipate like where things are going to go. Because I was in this group for 3 years, and
Yeah.
the person that I had this ended up having like kind of this interesting conflict with. Um, well, I don't know. I don't need to go down that personal road too much, but like I was like, wow, like some of the things that showed up personality wise later in the group through different things that were happening in our lives brought out parts of personality that like were not visible at all for like at least the first couple years.
Huh.
So, yeah. So,
That's actually wild to think about. I mean, that makes a lot of sense because especially if you're going into group with a specific thing you're looking for, and then the longer you're with each other, the more like different parts of yourselves are going to come out. And
mhm.
it is a thing where I'm like, I'm compatible with people like in a group therapy session. Like I went to like grief and bereavement group therapy, and I was like, we're compatible because we're all experiencing like grief, but I don't know how these people are otherwise. Like, yeah,
Right.
I don't actually know them on a
Yeah.
level other than that.
Right.
Mhm.
And if someone has PTSD that not, isn't necessarily like activated in the beginning, but that eventually does get activated, then the entire group process can really just become about that person's experience.
Mhm.
Everyone's else's different narratives or things that they're there to work on could get completely like sidelined for weeks at a time. That's kind of what happened in the group I was in. It was really frustrating to me. But also the therapist, and I kept checking in with our therapist and saying I thought he was very talented, but I was like, why aren't you sending this person in the group? Why aren't you sending them to a PTSD specialist?
Mhm.
And he was kind of like, Delia, you're not a therapist. You don't get to make that diagnosis. And I was like, what are you talking about? So obvious that that's what's happening right here. So it's really interesting too, because everyone has different perceptions. I don't know whether that therapist shared my perception and just was basically telling me like it's not your place to try to diagnose.
Mhm.
Fair enough. But also I was like, you know, um, this is really hijacking our whole group experience for like many weeks. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I
So,
think that's like a thing that if another group member came up to me and is like, hey, my experiences are being totally overshadowed by this person. Like, can you talk to them individually about it?
yeah.
Um, because yeah, I feel like that would be like the most wise decision, or else it's like you're kind of wasting other people's times if like they're coming to group like every week or every however long you're coming, and it's just you're kind of anticipating someone else just going to be taking up the whole time instead of
Mhm.
like actually collectively being involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting for that therapist not to be like, oh, maybe I should check in. I don't know. But
Yeah.
maybe they got, yeah, offended by you saying something about it. But
I don't know. I
mhm.
don't know. They're also like a Gestalt therapist who's very comfortable with like a lot of big feelings and a lot of like pretty high emotional intensity. So maybe they were like, this is fine for me.
Yeah.
For me, I was sort of like, I don't know if this should be happening in this container. So
Yeah, totally.
could have just been a difference in sensibilities, but
Yeah.
I agree with you. If someone came forward to me and had a complaint that they felt like their purpose was kind of like not being addressed because of that, I would feel some sense of wanting to correct that
Yeah.
unless I just thought that their perception was way off. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to like group therapies, kind of like what I learned in group dynamics. It's like one, it's a collective unit. So like you do have to kind of think about everyone working together in it. If there's
Hmm.
one person that kind of overtakes it, then that kind of breaks up the whole point of a group dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I guess that's the issues that I guess could come up in it.
Yeah. Totally. What are there other of these different alternatives beyond just individual therapy besides The two we've talked about, family and group that interest you?
That's what I was trying to think. I mean, I think about things like NA or AA meetings, things that are a little less like clinical, I guess, because they're not always run by people who are like clinicians. I do think those are valuable too, just as far as like building community.
Yeah.
When I took a couple different addiction classes, and you know, there are a lot of criticism for AA and NA just based on like the framework of it. But as far as, yeah, like building community and making sure like you're seen by other people who are going through similar, and you're also able to see people who've gotten out of it, I think that's like the biggest, yeah, benefit I could see or think about with another group.
Totally. Plus, the offering of this mentorship, right, through
Mhm.
sponsors who, again, may not be licensed, but they may have a lot of experience, and then especially, again, it's more accessible financially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the accessibility for sure.
Mhm.
Should we move on to number two?
Sure. Telehealth or telepsychotherapy. Yeah, they haven't decided on some issues and limitations to practice if not licensed in the place of residence defeats the purpose of the whole distance therapy idea. That was a really good point, I thought. And so these laws create a barrier to entry, and stop people practicing state to state, thinking they're doing a providers a favor. Um, yeah, I guess Dr. Bursing clearly feels like we should be able to work across state lines, and that's what I'm reading into her comment here. Um, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I guess that depends on your licensing.
True, true. Yeah. Well, I'm just getting an MFT. How about yourself?
I'm going for the LPC, but I don't see that happening for a long time as far as like building hours and stuff. I mean, it's something I'd like to do, especially if I plan on, yeah, moving or, yeah, traveling in the future and being able to still work. Um, for me, like from like a client perspective, I love telehealth. Like my last therapist was only through health, and the other one I had, we were in person before the pandemic, and we were able to switch to telehealth, and it was like a really wild shift because I've never done that before. So it was like we were both trying to like figure out how to do it together, which was kind of interesting. I was like, oh, this is just like a weird part of the future I never thought about, that I wouldn't be in person with my therapist. Um, but I could see like the cons of like confidentiality being a thing. I think like maybe on like, I think about how like Zoom has been cyber hacked before and how that could be a possibility with like telehealth in the future. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah, I guess there's like a lot of regulations I haven't super thought into because I don't know when I'll actually be doing telehealth in the future.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, I too had a pretty good experience with it as a client. My previous therapist, I only saw um, that way, and I think I saw her for 2 years. But I do believe that I did feel like there was a little something missing because of it.
Yeah, definitely. Hmm.
There was, I mean, I could feel her presence, and I could feel, but it was also like the pandemic. And so there was also this just feeling of isolation from being in a pandemic. So even though it was so useful to be able to be on telehealth, it also was sad because so much of our lives was virtual, and that was part of the problem. That was part of what we were suffering from. And so here I was looking for help in a medium that was reflective of the challenge that we were in there. But
That's a
but
great point. I
mm,
think about like how for a while I was only seeing my friends through Zoom because we were like in lockdown, and then I would go into therapy in telehealth, and then I would still be in my house. Like I would never like leave my house really. Maybe to
yeah,
go on a walk or something. But yeah, I was very cut off from like people and that energy exchange that I definitely benefit a lot from when I'm like in person with a therapist.
yeah, yeah. But it is super convenient, that's for
Mhm,
sure.
mhm.
And that same therapist ended up moving from the Bay Area up to Seattle, and I could have continued seeing her because
Cool.
of
Mhm,
that. And so I like, the mobility. It doesn't help you, I guess, moving to just any state or any place in the world, but
mhm.
for certain jurisdictions, it works. I think it's good. I think it's hard for me to imagine really using the somatic piece of therapy very effectively through telehealth. I think you can to a certain point, but you don't get to see the person's whole body, and you don't get to be in the energetic presence to like really feel what's happening for them somatically. So I feel like I would like to, for me, it's important to have the somatic piece be, um, you know, there all the time through therapy. So I could see, um, the limitations there.
Yeah, that's a good point. There are certain ones that don't translate as well through I will say I tried doing EMDR through telehealth and it did not work for me. It was really weird. Because obviously we're in a different room, and then trying to figure out where to like put my eye movement to is really confusing. And then she has to be like super attuned to what I look like and when I'm like ready. And it's like, yeah, it did not work. So I'll say some things just don't work over it.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can imagine that wouldn't work. But you gave it a try though.
Yeah, I tried. And I was like, "Yeah, I'll try this again in person somewhere else."
Nice. Um, I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts about this?
I think we covered.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
crazy regulations. I don't know. I guess like, yeah, I could see you brought up earlier the whole thing about some of these applications, video applications, not really letting us cover our bases in terms of um, the content, and
Mhm.
privacy and all that, and securing the privacy, but I don't know.
Yeah, so I was like, I think I need to read more into the regulations on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Alright,
Okay, we're
cool.
good.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Nice talking to you.
You too.